Hi everybody, this is On and I'm coming to you with this month's connecting videos. No surprise that the big topic this month is Roe versus Wade, and that's what I'm going to be addressing in this video. And I'm going to be looking at it from a code perspective. So hopefully this is going to open up some additional pieces to think about, not so much taking a stance one way or another, but maybe just opening up our minds a little bit about the currents and about the additional layers that are going on beyond just the surface and what we're seeing in the news. It's no surprise that we have all of this outbreak. They've been planning for it for a long time, which means this decision is really no big surprise to what's happening, to what's going on. It's almost like they already knew this was going to happen. And so they've already had been planning for weeks, actually, for riots to break out, and the posts have been up there. And so it's kind of interesting. For those that are wondering about my work, where some of the information comes from, it comes from this book, The Code Journey. And we're working with the 2022 edition right now because that's what applies. I put out a new edition of that book every year. And it's a great book for understanding some of the things that are happening in the world, for personal journey work, for just getting into the core truth and helping to filter through some of the lies and the deceptions and to really see where things are lining up and where they're not. And what is so interesting and part of addressing this was that we just hit the third part of a three-part portal that's some people refer to as the devil's portal because it's a 666 vibration or 666 numerology factor in there. And so it was very interesting to me that the verdict came out that day, and that particular day also noted some other transitions in some of our year influences. And so I want to just kind of break this down a little bit and say, let's look at the influences that were present on that day with this whole thing, and how does it connect to this decision, to this verdict that came out from the Supreme Court justices on things. So let's get started on this, because I know I only have so much time to work with, and I don't want to drag this out too far if I don't have to. So under our daily influences that way, we had an influence going on that makes us feel like a victim. A lot of victim energy going up, a lot of bullying and abusive energy coming up. And so it's really interesting when you step back and you take these objective perspectives on things, and you have to look at really who's sitting in what role. And this can be hard sometimes because, right, we're seeing the roles based on our own perspectives. It's like I can be sitting in an environment and I'm looking out the window saying, okay, there's nothing but trees here. But if there's ocean behind me and you're looking at me, you're only seeing ocean, you're not seeing the trees, right? So our perspective is definitely going to cloud things into whether we feel something is good or evil or this or that, or who's the victim, and so on and so forth. And what this is really going to be doing is opening up a lot of deeper layers. So I feel like this verdict is just the little opening of what's going to be coming out from this, because I think there's going to be a lot coming out from this, honestly. And so the key is people feeling like a victim. And we have to get down to, are people really being victimized, or are they not being victimized? And so when we have people living in extremes, they are naturally going to feel victimized by a decision like this. They are naturally going to feel like, okay, I'm being infringed upon. Now, the aspect is that in so much of this, I believe that people really should have the ability to make their own choices. I'm very pro-choice. At the same time, we have to be able to separate out what is a constitutional right versus what is a choice to have. And this is a big thing. We also have to realize that there are multiple pieces involved. There is what's best for the mother in a situation of abortion. There is what's best for the baby. There is an acknowledgement of having to really, there's so many layers. When you get into abortion, there is so many layers that are involved. And abortion itself, by a code energy, has a lot of lies, deception, and manipulation around it. And I think that is part of exactly what we're seeing right now is these lies and manipulation. And that is definitely in the codes of things. Matter of fact, in the daily influences, it talks about seeing more truth, which tells me that this verdict, this decision is going to show us a lot more truth about abortion than what people have known. They've been presented it, and most people, when they think about abortion, it's just like, well, I want my right to be able to give up my baby. You know, I want to be able to do this. I need to make that choice. What if I'm in a bad circumstance? What if I was raped? What if this? What if that? And I can have sympathy for that because my human self went through 7 rapes, state rapes, in 1 year of my life in my early 20s. And so I get it. I really do that. And I've been through that mindset, like what happens if, even though I'm taking precautions, even though I'm trying to be responsible, you know, things can still happen. Even people who are on contraceptives, things can still happen. It's not 100% proof, right? But the difference is a lot of people think that they put it in these extreme terms, that it's all or nothing. You know, it's either you can or you can't. And it actually isn't that. Even prior to Roe versus Wade, when we look at the situation, there were abilities to have an abortion. Was it totally readily acceptable, you know, easily done, like through all the Planned Parenthoods and things like that? And that's a whole nother realm of a hornet's nest to get into. No, it wasn't as easy to do it. But it also, you know, again, we have these pros and cons with each thing, because when things are not as easy to do, then we have to take more personal responsibility, more personal accountability. When things are very easy to do, people tend to give up that personal accountability, and they don't always stop and take some of the precautions that they need to in life in things, or think things through. So again, we have these extremists. And some of these extremists that are out there are yelling. I never hear from them any consideration for that child. And I think that that's, you know, another issue. We can't just say, you know, there's a huge selfishness here when you are telling us, you know, you want the right to abort. You know, that's like they don't want to take responsibility in their life and their decisions and things like this. And so this is a very tough topic, really it is. And I think we're going to see more and more truth come out. And what are some of the truths that are going to come out? I think actually this is going to open up a lot of truth around Planned Parenthood. Now, in some circles, that truth has already been out. It's been out for years. What do we know about it? We know that Bill Gates is a huge investor in Planned Parenthood. We know that Bill Gates' father ran Planned Parenthood, and this comes from Bill Gates. This isn't anything that's, you know, you can't find. It's out there. You just go search it, and Bill Gates is making these statements. And so you can go out there and you know, Google it. You'll find it. So when you start to look at who is invested in Planned Parenthood, and here's the other pieces. Yes, accidents do happen. Yes, we need to support women in healthcare. Yes, we need to, you know, have appropriate options for people. But some of these things that are happening, most people do not realize the kind of funds that are being drawn in. Even not that long ago, Project Veritas put out a video exposing Planned Parenthood from people within Planned Parenthood and what they were saying, and how they were talking about, hey, if I can sell enough body parts right now, then I will be able to get a Lamborghini this year versus, you know, all the other years and money. This is a huge profiteering thing. I mean, by the time they add up the body parts, the arms, the legs, the hearts, the organs, and everything else, they could take in, depending on the donor or who they're working with, they could take in $10,000, $20,000 for one baby, for baby parts. And it's absolutely disgusting when you get into this. It's absolutely disgusting. So I think these are some of the truths that are going to come out in it. Now, on the daily influences, we're also going to see the true colors surface in things. So those wanting control and not using and not getting it, They're going to use degrading tactics, demeaning tactics. That means they're going to come down on all these people. We already see that from the moment the verdict came out. We already see those tactics coming out from the extremists, those that are wanting control and power. We're already calling for violence. They were already calling for attacks. They were already calling for different things. And they're spreading lies. They're spreading lies. They're making the victims appear as perpetrators, which is what they're doing with the Supreme Court justices and others involved. They are trying to make themselves appear as victims. And this is really about being vindictive, and it's really the sociopathic nature. Now, again, I am pro women being able to have a choice about their bodies, but there's an extent, and there's a very big difference between saying, hey, I got raped, or I had this situation happen in my life, or I can't handle this, or I took precautions and something happened anyways, and I recognize that this is, I cannot bring a child into the world, and that's, that's one thing. But you can recognize that within 3 months. You don't need to be, when you're coming down to 9 months, and at the way some of the stuff was written recently, with that baby coming out of you, I mean, we're talking murder. It's not, somebody has to stand up for the life of that child as well. And and we have so many blurred lines in all of this. Again, we have so many blurred lines about it. So we have to be very careful, because the sociopathics, these people that are spreading the lies, these people that are antagonizing and calling for violence on people, and doing this demeaning, this degrading, which we already saw. We saw AOC out there doing a lot of shouting about stuff and things like that. And so when we go down this path, this is showing me where the lies and the manipulation are, because the people that are doing that, the people that are calling for these things, are standing in the lies. They're perpetuating the corruption. They're trying to distort who the perpetrators and the victims are and things. And I think we've got a lot of distortion going on when it comes down to this. And there's a lot that people haven't seen under the surface in things. So that's a big thing. And that's all in our daily influences. Then in the angel influences that cover that day, the scene, we start to see the unseen. That was one of the key pieces that were there. So we're through this verdict, we're going to start to see all of that hidden stuff, all of those lies, those deceptions, the corruption, the money-making schemes, the profiteering, all of these things. And I think Planned Parenthood, again, is going to be the big target on this, going to come out. And this is going to initiate a lot of stuff that's been sitting beneath the surface to come to the surface, where people can see more of the picture and realize that this goes way, way deeper than just, do I want to have a baby or do I not want to have a baby? And it goes way deeper than that. It goes way deeper than just the mother's rights and the baby's rights, and what can be done. And again, keep in mind that even though, yes, there will probably be a couple of states that will create some sort of total ban on things, most states, you still do have that ability to get an abortion. It's just not going to receive government funds for it, probably. And it will not be, the taxpayers will not be contributing in these distorted, channel funneled ways. And you're probably going to have to deal with a regular doctor, more so than some of the other options. And you have a certain period of time to go do something if you're making that choice. So it's not like it's an all or nothing, like all of a sudden nobody can get an abortion ever under any conditions. So we want to keep some of these pieces in mind, that it really isn't total extremism in there. And we have to watch out for the extremist parts of it. So we're going to start to see the unseen. So this verdict is going to open us up to being able to see what we haven't been able to see. It'll bring it more into the public eye. And then it also talks about those working from deception become detrimental to the team and inhibit its success. Well, I think we see this when they got very extreme, right? So the detrimental people, the corrupt, the people operating in corruption, deception, lies, all of those things, they took abortion to such an extreme that even a lot of the Democrats or their normal supporters or people like that said, whoa, this is too far. And that's the problem. These people that are operating in corruption always take things too far. They always go into these extremes. And when they go into those extremes, it takes an extreme to offset the extreme a lot of times until we can come back into balance. This is the way nature writes, right? If you have a pendulum and it swings way up and over here, it's got to come back and it's going to swing way up over here until it gradually keeps swinging down until it finds this middle ground, right? It doesn't swing way up over here and come down and go, oh, middle ground, going to stop. It's not the way it works. So we're going to have to come out of these extremes more and more if we're going to find truth and sanity in things and to find things that bring us together more, that really serve humanity. In the different layers and ways that it needs to do that. So we have that going on. So when, they've really destroyed themselves in this. And so people should not be looking at everybody trying to be pro-life as the demons. Really, if they wanted to keep some of these things, they should have been keeping the extremist on their own side in check. And we need to consider that. We need to keep the extremist in check to a certain extent. So that was the angel influences. Now, what's very interesting, a lot of people who read my book noted it too. They're like, isn't it interesting this decision came down on the third of the 3-part 666 portal? And I thought, yep, it's absolutely interesting because, so many people, again, they'll distort this different ways, seeing, based on their perceptions, what they believe is the evil side and which is the good side and which one is in which and things like that. So delving into the influences on the 666 portal on that third part of it, one of the pieces that was in there was we need to understand the dynamics of good versus evil, and we must see the value in each one. This is really an important piece. Both have value. And what happens when we have these extremists, these lies, these deception, the propaganda going around, is it doesn't allow us to look at the value of the other side of things. And this is what we need to do. We need to consider the other value. We don't want to become so uncaring or, in such a situation of being so pro-life that we're putting people in these extreme detriments in that process. So, again, I don't want to see abortion used as a method of birth control personally, but I do think people need to have a certain amount of, there's got to be a certain choice. And I think the base pieces allow for that choice in there. It gives somebody plenty of time to make their decision as opposed to making it under the stress of whatever in the last minute of things. So when we get down there, those dynamics of good versus evil, and what we really want to do is, instead of demonizing those that have a different point of view from us, we want to get down and we want to understand their point of view, understand what their real and true genuine concerns are, and realize the value of the concerns that they're having in there. And what I see is so many times that people are, well, I'm pro-choice on this issue, but I'm not pro-choice on this issue. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't really work that way. Either you're pro-choice or you're not pro-choice. So there's these different things. And again, a lot of layers. So we want to really start to understand, and through that understanding, then we can start to balance these pieces out. Because when we demonize things and we look at things in these super black and white extreme terms, then we create a lot of division. And ultimately, that is the bigger piece that's going on, is not even so much the issue as it is creating division. And this is a hot one to create division with, just about as hot as race or sometimes religion or other things. I mean, this is a key one to really create division with. And of course, corruption, that's what they love. Those that are operating in deception, corruption, they want to keep people in this turbulence. Also under that portal energy, it talks about we need to foster and nourish true essence We must find appropriate balances, don't have to extinguish, sorry, I made some note here, don't have to extinguish the opposite, just say no to the distortions. And we must stop enabling corruption, abuse, greed, and control. And this is an opportunity for release and transformation out of materialism. Don't turn our power over to corruption. So when we look at this, this is really a call. Having this decision come down on this day is really calling us to say, where is that balance? Where is the appropriate aspects? And what a lot of people don't realize, like, I mean, if you're adults and you want to have whatever sexual life you want to have, that is, you know, really your choice to do in this world. Whether I agree with that choice or not is not the point. You have the choice to do that. You can do that. As long as you're not breaking the law in that process, you can do that. Now, that being said, our world has been pushed so far into materialism, so far into some of the hedonistic aspects, that we also have almost lost sight to where we've turned our power over to that, where we turn our power over to organizations like Planned Parenthood, when we say, hey, well, you know, who cares? If I get pregnant, I'll just go have an abortion. So that opens up whole other layers that are self-defeating for us, whole other layers that pull us out of our divinity, whole other layers that are saying, I don't care, I'm not going to be responsible. And what this is this is an absorption of materialism. It's a disconnect from the spirit that happens. And again, I mean, people want to do their thing, you know, and indulge in sexual pleasures or whatever. That's their choice, as long as it's not breaking the law, right? So, but what we have to do is look at, it's not just a factor of, hey, do I need to go get an abortion or not have an abortion or this or that? And I know of people who were adopted along the way. I know of people who have faced these issues along the way. And, you know, they've said, you know, I'm really glad I didn't take that path, even though I was standing in the building. I'm glad I didn't take that path. And it's powerful to start to do that. But we have to realize, when you go and you make these choices, again, it's not just about that. There are bigger layers involved that involves corruption. So like, the more abortions that are going on, the more Planned Parenthood is supported. The more Planned Parenthood is supported, the more corruption that is being nurtured in the world. So, you know, if you're going to make a choice, it's not up to me and other people to pay for your choice. If you're going to make that choice, you have to deal with paying for these things. You have to, you know, take care of yourself in essence, from that aspect. It's kind of like, if I want to go out and have a certain type of meal, it's not your responsibility to pay for your meal. I need to be able to pay for my meal. And so this is where we really have to watch this, and we really have to realize and see these additional layers of greed and corruption that are involved, and how they actually are pushing people in this direction. And it used to be many years ago, they really did stick more just to some of the medical services. They weren't totally that. And then, you know, I can see that now, but now they've even expanded to encouraging, you know, encouraging more hedonistic sexual behaviors and things like that, and getting more pleasure out of sex and things like that, which, you know, again, I'm not against people having their pleasure. Okay, but at the same time, why are they encouraging it? We're not asking ourselves. It's not because they think you should have a pleasurable sex life. It's because when you have that, it encourages conception. When it encourages conception and they know you're in certain situations and already coming to them because you can't deal with things, they're more likely to get an abortion from you. It's about money, it's about business. And that's where the bigger piece is that nobody, well, I won't say nobody, there definitely are people, where a lot of people are not aware of and not looking at it. Now, as we move on, we have in the month influences, it talks about we are in great transformation, be aware paths that lead into greater freedom, which remove it, must not repeat past restriction and oppression, must be able to stand strong as an individual, closure to one way of life and propel into a new way of life, rooted in coming into stronger divine alignment. Upheavals are leading to spiritually rich journeys. Now, this is very interesting because we can say, okay, well, in some of this decision, right, aren't they restricting and oppressing people? Again, when you really get down to it, no, they're not totally saying you can't do this. They're just saying that you can't do it at a certain point down the line, like to a point, you know, that's an extreme point, really. Again, they're trying to remove that extremism. But that being said, we also have to be very, very careful that this doesn't lead to many aspects of oppression and restriction on things. And this is an important thing. We have to be careful of what is an appropriate boundary and what is full-on restriction. Now, you know, full-on restriction is saying you can't have an abortion no matter what the conditions are. That would be full-on restriction. Appropriate limits are saying abortions shouldn't be performed after a certain point, and you know, there should only be rare exceptions after between the next point. And so it's not really truly a restriction in there, but we have to be careful of crossing that line. And that's where we have to keep bringing things back into balance, back into check, as I've already said. We need to realize that through this decision, it's closing out a big portion of the way things have been, and it's propelling us into something else. So we really want to take this as an opportunity. We want to be careful that we are not, again, falling into that past, right? That we're not going into repeating the past of making women oppressive, barefoot, pregnant all the time, you know, making them vulnerable to rapes. That is always something that I have to look at, right? Because once you remove some of these rights, does that open the door for other crimes to happen? And we will have to stay on top of that. Part of why we don't want to get lax in our police areas and our police forces and our law aspects of things, because we want to be able to protect them from that happening and not be releasing criminals on the streets like we've been seeing over the last year or so, year and a half going on, of major criminals, violent criminals release and people doing these things. So again, this is our opportunity to come into divine alignment, to get out of these extremes. It's a call to saying, okay, these upheavals are leading us into giving us the opportunity to become more spiritually aligned. And that's what we want to look at. What are the spiritual values? Not just what do I want? What does my ego want? What is the extremist propaganda being pushed down me? And not just like, okay, you can't have any choices. What is the spiritually aligned path in there? And that's what we have to get down to, you know, what is the soul path? That comes down to responsibility, right? That comes down to other things. The month influences also talk about, they encourage us to learn from others, especially if they are different views, about finding balance and harmony instead of battle and single-mindedness, about focusing on true issues instead of converting others. So this is really huge in what we see what's going on. So many people are being sucked into the battle of this situation and this decision. And what we need to be doing, again, as I mentioned before, is we need to learn from each other. We need to be open to what those who have different opinions are saying. We need to find our balance and our harmony in this situation instead of being at battle with each other, instead of going through the single-mindedness of, I only matter and my baby doesn't matter, or only the baby matters and the mother doesn't matter. So we have to find our balance in this situation. We have to stop trying to convert people to our point of view, because the real expansion, the real growth, the real spiritual alignment comes from bringing in these different points of views and finding out how to get them to work in balance and harmony. So that's where we want our real focus to be. It also talks about in the month, victim deprivation patterns are getting triggered. I don't even think I need to talk about that. um, True leaders step into action and stand up for the rights of those that cannot stand up for themselves. Now, as much as whether you agree or don't agree with the Supreme Court decisions, there is no doubt that they were standing up for the rights of unborn children. And those children are still alive. They are still got a heartbeat. They're still alive, and they deserve to be defended. They deserve to have somebody stand up for them. And a lot of these people that are in the extremists, what are we seeing playing out? We're seeing the victim patterns play out. We're seeing the deprivation patterns play out. It's not even necessarily really connected to the abortion issue. It's the fact of where they have such great fears of being victimized and in deprivation, and they are living in those victim spaces. They want to be the victim. They play the victim all the time, and they want to believe that this is about deprivation. Well, that's a big lie. And these are issues that they haven't addressed maybe in their life. It is the tool that is always used by the corruption side of things, of being the victim in the deprivation, because they think that everybody's going to support that and jump on board and go, oh, you're a victim and now you'll get my sympathy. And this is all sociopathic human ego stuff that is just a bunch of distortions and a bunch of lies and a bunch of corruption. So when we start to look at these things from a more rational mind, or from facts and logic, and the detriments that this has had on the African American community, the abortion aspects have had a tremendous detrimental impact on a lot of the African American community. I'm not saying all of it, but a lot of it in there. So we have to look at it again. Who's funding these things? Who's funding it? It's the rich people that are behind it. It's some of these elite structures like Bill Gates, and he's a huge funder of this stuff. And you have to ask yourself, why is Bill Gates so invested in this? And there's a lot of thoughts out there that you can go out and explore in there, but we want to look at it and say, if you're being super triggered by this decision, then you need to be looking at where you are holding on to these victim and deprivation concepts and ideas and patterns, because this is just one more piece. This is one more of that culture and society that has, you know, the corrupt structures have forced into society this concept of victim being this total victimization and deprivation. Yes, there are victims out there. Yes, there are people deprived out there, but that is different than the victim and deprivation mindset that really isn't based in truth. So that's a big piece. Now, in the year influences that we have going on, great accomplishments where people come together and don't compete. Huge thing. Personal accountability, and bring about things that benefit humanity. So again, as I've been talking about, a lot of this decision comes down to bringing people more into personal accountability, getting them out of the materialism aspect of not being accountable. When we're living in non-accountable ways, we're living in a very materialistic, separated from divinity and God aspect. And so when we come around, and the more personal accountability we're willing to take, then actually the less restrictions we need in the world. And the more we come into divine alignment, the more we come into the soul processes of things. And we really want to look at what is going to benefit humanity. And again, that there are a lot of views on what does and doesn't, but we need to find the balance, right? We need to come together. We need to stop competing against one another, saying it's all or nothing. And we need to start saying, okay, how do we work with this? How do we open up to this? And I think part of that balance is saying, you know, it's your choice to go and get an abortion done, but we don't fund it through the government. It's not up to the government to do that. So it's not a constitutional right. So this is where a lot of things get blurred again, you know, and I believe, you know, if that's what somebody needs to do for themselves, that's their choice. I have to honor that, but I should not pay for it in there. So again, we need to look at these pieces. We want to find out where's the ability, where do we need to be more accountable? And that's part of what this decision is bringing down is accountability, personal accountability, and not this extremism. And what aspects of this can benefit humanity? And there are multiple aspects. Again, it brings people into personal accountability. The more they're in personal accountability, the more that benefits humanity. It brings people to think about things a little bit more. It brings people to actually move more into the spiritual side of their existence and divine connection versus only seeing the material world existence or living fully in that, or living anti divinity or anti-spiritual alignment. And so that is going to always benefit humanity. Now, in our starseed energies, we have a time of great learning, which leads to success versus locking us into lies. Power struggles grow with those in power, emotional turbulence, teach about elite power structures and corruption, hypersensitivity, and more dramatic. So isn't that interesting? That comes back to what I said at the very beginning, that this is going to open us up to the connections that the elites have in this organization. I think this is really going to expose a lot of stuff in regards to Bill Gates' role in Planned Parenthood and these different elite structures that are set up in the world that are not benefiting humanity. This is going to be a great time for us to learn. And while we may not be able to see it in the moment, or some people can't see it in the moment, this is really showing us that somewhere this decision is leading us towards a success instead of locking us into lies. And again, at the beginning, it said that too, that there were a lot of lies and deceptions around this, this whole abortion aspect and the abortion pieces of things. And so this is, when this decision comes down today, it's really showing me that we are being released from lies instead of being locked further into them. And yes, that's going to be power struggles between people who are in charge. We're already seeing that, right? I mean, Pelosi's come out, AOC's come out, Biden's come out, you know, they're all making these threats. Maxine Waters came out and made some threats on things. And we're seeing a lot of emotional turbulence. And that's what the corruption feeds off of, is that emotional turbulence. Now, the generational energy talks about sudden advancements and success for God-based energy, with retaliation from those working against God, stirs up attacks on divine warriors. Those in distortions fear divine success and can lead to sudden death or accidents. So we're already again seeing this. This decision comes down. It's a God-aligned decision, like it or not. It's a God-aligned decision. And that is creating those that are not God-aligned to retaliate, to stir up things, to attack these people. And there's no doubt there's probably going to be attacks made on the Supreme Court justices. We've already seen the precedents of the current administration showing that they're not going to protect our justices very well. And they don't care about this in regards to what attacks are made on them. And we very well could see assassination attempts or actual assassinations coming forth in this process. And this is coming from those people that are working against divine success, that are working against divinity in our world. And so these attacks, this uprising that I'm seeing, it is a clear sign. Those that are calling for it, those that are creating it, those that are participating in this are not standing in divine alignment. And again, you can agree with the choice or not agree with it, but once you cross that line to the violence, once you cross that line to the retaliation, you're no longer in divine alignment, no matter what your choice is. Then you have the world influences, and those working in lies, deception, and manipulation encourage battles. Corruption wants people to sell their souls. Nothing can be taken at face value. Remain in observation and unfold the real story. And I think that is the key. Just like I said, all those people that are calling for the violence, all those people that are encouraging battles, all those people that are encouraging things. And we're seeing it in Janet Mills, governor in Maine. We're seeing it in Elizabeth Warren. We're seeing it in Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, all of these extremist people. And they're trying to get you to sell your souls. They're not telling you that's what they're doing, but that's what they're trying to do in this process. It literally is coming down to that. And our key and our responsibility is that we do not take things at face value, and that we remain in observation and we get to the real story behind this whole thing, which is way beyond one decision of Roe versus Wade. Just as it was 50 years ago, just as it is now, we need to get to the real story of this. And the real story has to do with the corrupt elite structures that are underlying the organizations that are making millions of dollars, if not billions, off of abortions and off of killing unborn children. And this is where the real crisis is. It goes way beyond, again, whether somebody wants to have an abortion or doesn't want to have an abortion. There are so many other layers, and they're going to be coming out. So what I encourage you to do in this process is to remain in observation, look for the real stories, pay attention to these different things and who is calling for violence and who is doing this. These things, many of the violence that is outbreaking, some of it is very real and natural, and some of it is coming from people who don't understand what's going on. Some of it comes from just people being in extreme spaces. Some of it is planted people out there that have been paid to create disruption and anger and violence. And these are troops on the ground that are paid by people like George Soros. So I know that's kind of a lot of information, but I wanted to make all of those code connections to this decision, because I think given the day that it happened on, it is probably going to be one of the most impactful things that is going to be part of this big transformation that we're in. And again, if we can sit back in observation and not make anything totally right or wrong, good, evil, and get out of some of these battles and these dynamics and just come back into, okay, let's get to the real story. Let's start to communicate. Let's stay out of division with each other, and let's express what each other's concerns are. And let's start to take everybody's needs into account, born and unborn. So these are all very, very important things, and all things that we want to keep in mind. Hey, I'm happy to say this is the last video before I head on the road. I'm going to be trying to keep everything going from the road the best I can over the next 4 months. I am going to be traveling around with my work. I am going to be in Denver this September. I'm going to be doing an expo out there. I'm going to be doing an expo in Texas, a little outside of Dallas. I'm going to be in Michigan. In Dallas and Michigan area, both going to be happening in October. I'll be in Vermont late October doing an event there. I'm sure lots of events are going to be added along the way. I'm going to be making a lot of contact with businesses and stores along the way. So again, don't forget, you can pick this up. 2023 is going to get released in mid-August. So look for that to come out. If you really want to stay on top of things and get this information where you can start to sort through the pieces yourself and start to put the pieces together yourself, pick up a copy of the book. It's not all about politics. It's about a spiritual journey. It's about living the best life you can. It's about opening compassion in the world. But it also gives us a lot of insights on what is happening in our world. And when we see things come down, and looking at the timing and seeing what the influences are that are present under those situations, it can definitely open our eyes up to understanding what is happening a lot more. Take care, everybody, and I will see you from the road next month.